Greetings, everybody. Welcome. My name is John Bard. I am one of the owners of Children's Book Insider, the Children's Writing Monthly, and we're real happy that you are here tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time, the Kidlit Distancing Social is something we started in March, maybe April?
Yeah, this is our 13th
one, right? But we're here every week, and we're doing it so we can keep you guys motivated and moving forward and keep a sense of community, and just generally so we could all keep in touch and put a smile on your faces. And we're certainly going to be shooting to do that tonight. If you want to get on our list so that you can know about all the topics before each social, and also get the links to the replays, you want to go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet and sign up. You'll get a free gift, and that is our Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet. It's 30 years worth of everything we know about writing a children's book into one ebook, and it's totally free. So you can do that. Also, I wanted to show you, for those of you who are regulars and also for the new folks, we now have all of the replays available on our blog. So go to writeforkids.org, and then you'll see right there, watch all the Kidlit Distancing Social replays. Click on that. And there you go. There's all of them. So you can definitely check that out. Also, along the side here, there's some interesting things you might like to check out. We have some cool stuff about writing picture books, about submitting your manuscript to a publisher, knowing if your story's any good, breaking into children's nonfiction. And then right here, if you're interested in Children's Book Insider, which is the newsletter that we've been publishing now for 30 years, and is the secret weapon, and we celebrate some of our subscribers' successes every week, go right here and click on this, and that'll tell you how you can become a member of CBI. And one last thing, for those of you who are CBI subscribers, the new issue, the July issue, will be available tomorrow. We just finished it this afternoon, and you can go, let's see, is that showing up on your screen? Hopefully. That is the cover, anyway. and you will see that tomorrow in your email inboxes, so have a look at that. Okay, I think all the business is done. Great. All right.
Listening to himself on Facebook simultaneously.
It would not be a distancing social if I didn't screw up technically. That was like psychedelic. It still is. My phone just took a life of its own. Okay, well, like I said, it wouldn't be a distancing social if I didn't screw up technically somewhere at the beginning. Fortunately, Laura tends not to screw up, and she'll take you the rest of the way, so you're in safe hands. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn off my camera, and I'm going to
do the where in the world is Laura's slide. Next slide.
There you go. I'm going to turn off my camera. Laura will be in here. So I'll introduce you to Laura. She is my wife of 27 years, my business partner of 30 years. And she is your host this evening. She's the publisher of Children's Book Insider and a million other things, but she knows what she's talking about. And she's going to be talking to Josh Funk. So you guys are going to have an excellent time. So in just a minute, you'll see Laura. Enjoy yourselves.
Okay, I'm coming to you from a secret location. Hang on. Have to get my location secured here. Okay. I know. John's telling me to stop share. It's like, I know. Oh, there we go. Now we turn on the video. There we go. Hi, everybody. We got it together now. So every week we do a Where in the World is Laura segment where I have some literary landmark behind me and you have to tell me where I am. So I'm actually going to tell you what this building is because the building, sorry, I was looking at a comment, is not the landmark. It's what's in it is what is so cool. So this is, because you probably can't read the little sign on the door, it's the John Rayner Memorial Library at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But there's something really, really cool inside. There's a lot of really, really cool stuff inside these libraries, actually. But I'm thinking of one particular thing. Thank you, whoever said I look great. I really appreciate that. Joan. You know, Corona hair, you get, after a while, you're just like, yeah, whatever. But thank you. Anyway, I want to hear your guesses in the chat box. Someone else said nice teeth. I'm going to get a very big head tonight. Any guesses? Now, those of you who live in Wisconsin might know this. Those of you who went to Marquette should know this. Steve, nice glasses. You're all going to make me laugh. I will give you some clues. And earrings. I will give you some clues, but I want to see some guesses in the chat box. So there is something really cool inside this library. So, biggest piece of cheese. No, no, no. It's literary. It's literary. So this writer wrote a lot of stuff, but a particularly famous series. And the writer himself is from England. And give me at least one guess before I give you another clue. You can guess something in the chat box. C.S. Lewis, good guess, but no. Roald Dahl, nope. Eric Carle, nope. Not C.S. Lewis. Kipling, no. No picture book. Actually, he did write a short children's book, but you probably don't know it. But his novels, series of novels. Philip Pullman, nope. Good guess, but no. He wrote his first famous book, came out, I believe, in 1956. Not Milne. I know, I'm sorry, we have it so that you can't see each other's comments. That's why I'm reading them out. I will give you another guess. He was a professor at Oxford University in England. Not Salinger. Ah, here we go. J.R.R. Tolkien. Steve Swinburne gets it. Steve's from England, so he's kind of cheating. Yes. So this library houses the writings, and I'm going to start sharing our screen again. And I'll have to back up on the slides because they went crazy before. There we go. The J.R.R. Tolkien collection at the Rayner Memorial Library in Marquette University. And this is just a really cool story. When I stumbled on this, I thought I have to tell you guys about this. So the collection of J.R.R. Tolkien's works, and he was a professor of Old and Middle English language and literature at Oxford. So you can see how that influenced his writing so much. So this collection contains the original manuscripts and multiple working drafts for 3 of his most celebrated works: The Hobbit, Farmer Giles of Ham, and The Lord of the Rings, as well as the original copy of the children's book, Mr. Bliss, which apparently was published in facsimile form in 1982. So we'll have to track that one down. As well as a host of other writings by him, about him, etc. Now, here's what's really interesting. It's like, well, why aren't these at Oxford University, right? They are at Marquette because of the vision of William Reedy, who was the director of libraries at Marquette from 1956 to 63. And he was appointed with the understanding that he would aggressively collect material for the newly constructed Memorial Library. And he recognized The Lord of the Rings as a masterpiece soon after its publication. And this was way before anybody was talking about it, way before anybody knew who J.R.R. Tolkien was. And so he approached Tolkien in 1956 and asked, can I buy your manuscripts for the library? And no one else was asking Tolkien if he could, you know, if they could house his works. And so He sold the manuscripts to the library for £1,500, which is about $1,900 in today's dollars. So isn't that amazing that the library has that collection? And that is at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So if you are a Lord of the Rings fan, visiting that university and seeing that collection has got to be on your bucket list. I think that's just so cool. And as you can see, this is the first page from The Lord of the Rings, and you can see he wrote it in hand. And look at that cool handwriting. I mean, just looking at that would be really, really fun. So that's our little trivia for the day. So now we get to celebrate. As John said earlier, we celebrate the successes of our people. So I have 3 cool things to celebrate with you tonight. Julie Augenson recently signed with a literary agent. Woo, Julie. She's now represented by Joyce Sweeney from the Seymour Agency. And this is what she wrote. For the past 8 years, I've been plugging away with my writing while attending SCBWI conferences, 12 by 12 picture book challenges, Picture Book Summit, and reading Children's Book Insiders. So good for you, Julie. All that hard work paid off. All that learning paid off. And we are waiting for you to let us know about your first book sale, and we will celebrate with you when that happens. So congratulations. Carol Doringer had her picture book manuscript, The Living Treehouse, named runner-up in the SCBWI Michigan's Nonfiction Mentorship Contest. And the prize for this was she received a detailed critique from the mentor author, Patricia Newman. So that is so, so valuable. And that's a great reason to enter contests. And that was her, you know, she was runner-up, which is a huge accomplishment because a lot of people enter these contests. But a lot of great contests have really great prizes for runner-ups as well as the winners. And that is so valuable. And we're going to have a guest on in about 3 weeks or so at a distancing social who is the winner of a major contest. And he's also a well-published author, but his most recent manuscript, unpublished, won a contest, and he's going to talk a lot about the value of entering contests. So that's going to be fun. Sherry Howard revealed the cover of her middle grade novel, Spirits Among Us, which will be published by Raycraft Books this October. So she just today had the big cover reveal. So that is awesome. Congratulations, Sherry. And we're really looking forward to seeing your book in October. So send us your good news. This is the email, mail@writeforkids.org, and put celebrate in the subject line, and we will feature you on a future distancing social. And I want to remind you all that good news comes in many forms. So if you read a book this week that inspired you and that taught you finally how to incorporate setting into the action of your story, that's something to celebrate. If you got an idea that you're excited about and you're starting to roll it around in your head and develop the idea, that is something to celebrate. If you started research on your next nonfiction project or an article that you want to write, let us know about that. If you started writing your manuscript, even the very first rough draft, let us know. We want to celebrate every little step with you. And so I am expecting and hoping and wanting my inbox to be flooded with all these great celebrate emails. So let us know every little step you're taking, and we will put you on a distancing social because it's all awesome. Now we're going to take a poll. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, we take a very scientific poll every week. And our poll this week is best animated movie adaptation of a children's book. You've got 6 choices here. And I put next to each choice who the author of the book is, because a lot of people don't realize who wrote the original book of the movie. So I want you all to vote. Like I said, this is very important scientific polling we're doing. And we need the data. The children's book community needs your data. All right. Oh, we've got two of them here, neck and neck. You can't see the results yet, but I can. So, you know, we need more of you to weigh in here because we're going to have a vote off, you know. I'm going to have to create another poll, and that'll create another technical difficulty that we might not recover from. Joni, I'd also put in a vote for Babe. Yeah, there's a lot of great, yeah, Bambi. I kind of tried to avoid the older Disney stuff. I thought I wanted most stuff that was a little newer. I mean, there's a few older things on here. By me, older is stuff when I was a kid. So if it's anything that my son watched when he was a kid, I consider it new, even though Matt is 24 right now. That's how time changes as you get older, right? All right, I'm gonna 5 more seconds here. 5, 4, 3, 2, get your votes in. 1, polls are closed. All right. Shrek pulls it out in the end by a hair. Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon were neck and neck there for quite a while. I wasn't sure, but I'm glad you voted for Shrek. I love that book, and William Steig, and I used to work for Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and William Steig was one of our authors, and it was an old office, real old school publisher. The authors would kind of wander in, sit down at whoever's desk happened to be empty, make a phone call. You know, it was very casual. And I came back from lunch one day and William Steig was sitting at my desk making a phone call. So I let him be. I let him make his phone call. So, okay. Thank you all for voting. Here we go. Another feature every week is publishing news and links of interest. So the June 29th issue of Publishers Weekly included a noteworthy new releases for children and teens for May and June 2020. Whole list of books, reviews, things that they think are worth reading. So as I've said in past distancing socials, all Publishers Weekly content, first of all, those of you who don't know, Publishers Weekly is a big trade magazine, comes out once a week. It talks about all things publishing, and it is an expensive thing to subscribe to. Mostly it's subscribed to by people who work in publishing. But during this time, Publishers Weekly is putting all of their content, making their content free digitally. So you can actually get Publishers Weekly magazine delivered to your email inbox every week right now. Go to publishersweekly.com to sign up for that. And what's really cool is that they put out these book lists all the time. So the reason I'm bringing this one up is because this is stuff that's just come out from publishers in the last 2 months. So one of the things you need to be doing if you are researching markets for your manuscripts is to know what publishers are doing right now, which publishers are publishing certain kinds of books right now. So you can start seeing get a sense of their lists, what they like, what the editors are looking for. Also, these are going to be the books that are going to be influencing maybe future trends, maybe future whatever. So it's good for you to sort of see what's out there, what's just come out. We always tell you don't write specifically to a trend because by the time your book comes out, the trend will probably be over. But there are sort of just developments in publishing. You know, for example, nonfiction is really hot right now. So that's not a trend, that's just a shift in the industry. And so you'll get a sense of that from reading these lists. Bookends Literary Agency has an article on their website, bookendsliterary.com, about standard word counts for different types of books. And I made a bit.ly link, take you right there, bit.ly/bookends word count. This is really great because I get asked this question all the time, and I really love it when literary agents put out a current word count article because they know what editors are looking for right now as far as word counts. So I would definitely bookmark that one for yourself and have a sense of they go through all the age groups and sort of what's standard. Obviously, your book might vary a little bit depending on story, but this will give you sort of a general guideline to shoot for. So I did a little poll of my own here. I went through Publishers Marketplace, which is, I have a link down there at the bottom, publishersmarketplace.com. This is it's another arm of Publishers Weekly that you can subscribe to. It's $25 a month. It's all online, but it is a big database of all the deals that are being made in publishing. By the hour, it's updated. And a little description of the book that got sold, the genre it's in. It tells you who bought it, including the editor. And it tells you what agent represented the deal. And there's a lot of other great information on Publishers Marketplace. But again, it's a really great resource if you are starting to compile your submission list. What agents are you going to submit to? What editors are you going to submit to? This is where you can see what they are actually buying and selling right now, hour by hour. And I did this afternoon. I made this count. I'm guessing there were more than 39 book deals by the end of today. This is just for the last 10 days or so. Just in the children's books, 10 fiction picture books. Picture books always are usually at the top of how many books are sold. But 11 middle grade novels and 3 middle grade series. Middle grade is really, really popular right now. 8 young adult novels, a graphic novel series, young adult digital fiction. That was interesting. It's digital only. It's coming out just as an ebook. 2 young adult nonfiction books and 2 nonfiction picture books. So what this says to me, and again, all these numbers are, you have to interpret it because these are things that were represented by agents. Most of the time, that's what you're going to see in Publishers Marketplace because the agents are the ones who list the deals in Publishers Marketplace because they want people to know what they've been selling. When an author or an illustrator acts as their own agent and sells the book directly to the publisher, very rarely is that in Publishers Marketplace. So what I'm saying is there were more deals than this that happened this week, I'm sure. But what's interesting to me is if you read market listings like in CBI and other places about what editors and agents are looking for, a lot of them are asking for nonfiction right now, especially in the picture book area. So we know that that's a hot market. Only 2 nonfiction picture books were sold, which says to me, not a lot of people are writing nonfiction picture books right now. A lot of people are writing fiction that agents are representing. But if you are thinking about writing nonfiction, you might want to get on that because editors are asking for it. We had a big webinar last week with Lionel Bender where he talked about the school and library market for nonfiction. Huge, right? Not a lot of people writing it right now. So just keep that in mind. That's all information you can use to help yourself as you build your career as an author. All right, now we get to have some fun. So I am very excited to welcome Josh Funk onto the Distancing Social this week to talk about building series. And Josh, go ahead and turn on your camera and your microphone. Josh writes silly stories, which very often end up as series. And you can see 4 of his series right here in front of you. He's also the author of 4 standalone picture books with more coming soon. So Josh, you are a busy man. Now, 3 of your series have new books coming out this fall. You've got Short and Sweet with the Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast series coming out in September 1st. It's Not Little Red Riding Hood from It's Not a Fairy Tale. And Where is Our Library? For the Patience and Fortitude series, which is awesome. I love Patience and Fortitude. So I'm really excited to have you here tonight, Josh. Welcome. Thank you for being on. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me, Laura and John. I appreciate you asking me to come on. This is really exciting. Thank you.
Yes, we're great. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other much more easily. So what I was thinking about, what I was going to ask you about series building, and it occurred to me that even though all your series are in the picture book format, what the elements of a good series really work and I think are important across the board. So there are certain things you have to have in a good series, whether you're writing a picture book or middle grade or young adult series or chapter book series. And what struck me with yours are, well, there's two main elements. First of all, you've got a great concept, kind of a unique, fun, interesting, different concept that holds the series together. And it's got to have enough room in it so that you can write about it in a lot of different books. So was that a consideration? What happens with you first with these? Do you come up with a concept, or is the character first?
I think that I think about what I want to see illustrated. That's one of the big things, is that I'm not an illustrator, and I'm very fortunate that I've been paired with amazing, talented people who are able to illustrate the books that I've written. I think that, I thought it would be cool to see pancakes and French toast racing through a fridge for the last drop of syrup. So I wrote a story about that. And that's kind of where I think a lot of my ideas come from. I would say I'm not sure that I think about it as a series going into it. Like whenever I write a story and I do a million drafts of it, not a million, but a good dozen at least on average, you get attached to your characters and you get excited about maybe different things that they could do in another adventure, especially if you're on the 12th draft and you're getting, so those ideas are sort of always there, and sometimes you write them down but I think I don't really ever go into things thinking that it'll be a series. Well, I should say at first I didn't think that when I started writing. Now that I have an agent, I know that sometimes as we're pitching stories, we may get to the point where we know there's going to be interest. But for the most part, most of my books didn't sell as multiple book deals.
Right.
So
I think that's very common with the picture book series. I think you get the first book out, it gets some legs, it gets an audience, and then did the editors come to you and say, we'd like another one?
So, well, all right. When it's different for every book and every series. I feel like I see a lot of deals. I don't pay as much attention to publishers' marketplace, but I pay attention to the children's bookshelf that PW puts out every Tuesday and Thursday, and I know they're not exactly the same thing, but they have. You'll see a lot of times it's so and so bought a book that was plus an unnamed second book, and sometimes it's an unnamed sequel, but usually it's an unnamed second book, and I don't always. I feel like sometimes they have a sequel in mind, maybe, but they haven't agreed to it. For me, when my first book was coming out, my Sterling, the publisher, they identified it as one of the titles that they were going to publicize at Book Expo, and they made swag for it on their own that I didn't have to make. So it was one of those things where I knew there was in-house excitement for it. And I took a leap on my own. And the truth is, as soon as I saw Brendan Kearney's illustrations, his sketches for the book, I immediately visualized the world as something with so much more depth than I previously had. And that's when I decided I want to write another story about this. This is so cool. But I think every story you write, you're like, I want to write more about these because I love these characters. I spent a lot of time with them. But I know that so that is actually when I started writing a sequel. I started at least brainstorming. I started thinking, and I wrote the entire sequel on my own, sent it to critique partners, passed it around before I sent it to my agent, and my agent sent it to the editor a couple months before the release of the first book. And they actually made an offer about a month before the first book came out based on pre-sales numbers. So, and compared to expectations, and also it was a first book deal. So it wasn't, they didn't pay all that much for it, it being a first book deal. So, so yeah, I think that they were open to it, to having a second one. And I've actually done that with all four. I wrote the Case of the Stinky Stench before this one came out. And And similarly, I wrote Mission Defrostable before this one came out. And then Short and Sweet, I had an offer, like maybe not in writing, but I had already written it before they made an offer. I'd written it before they made an offer. It wasn't a deal where it was like, yeah, go write a second one, we trust you. I had to write it first. I'm hoping that they'll offer on a fifth one before I write it, and we're in a bit of a standstill right now on that. But there's other things going on at the publisher with COVID, so there's a lot of things going on. So everything's a little bit slower. But for this series, I didn't pitch sequels until I did them all one at a time. But for some of my other series, for how to code a sandcastle, for this one, it was a 2-book deal. I had 2 publishers that were interested in a coding picture book, and so that was a 2-book deal, and it was always going to be a second book about coding. It wasn't going to be like a second unnamed, book about whatever. And so from that perspective, for that one, I did have how to code a roller coaster already kind of in my head, but it wasn't specifically that book. And then, It's Not a Fairy Tale, I had actually written a bunch of fun fairy tales, and this was the best one. And so we went out with this one. And I think right after the editor acquired it, I mentioned that there were others. And for this series, she actually made an offer based on a pitch of the sequel. So I didn't have to write it. And I didn't expect that. Neither did my agent. So we said, hey, here's 2 ideas. We had one, Hansel and Gretel could be the second one. And then we had another idea that was not a Little Red Riding Hood. It was something else. And they said, we like it. We'll do Hansel and Gretel. Here's an offer. And so for that one, I didn't have to write it until I had the offer. But I fully expected that I was going to. And so, it's every story, everyone's story, every book story has its own story. Every path, everyone who gets their agent it's some amazing story for that. And everyone's is unique. And so I feel like it's like that with these books too. And in fact, so the last one that I have multiple books of is Lost in the Library. It's about the New York Public Library lion statues. And this one, the sequel is called Where is Our Library? I was not planning on writing a second one. This one, Macmillan, Henry Holt, and it's an imprint at Macmillan. They and the New York Public Library got together and decided that they were going to make a bunch of books about the New York Public Library. There's a middle grade series by Kristen Tubb, and there's I think they made some coloring books. And my agent found out about this, and I actually the editor pitched her what the plot was going to be, and the idea was that Patience gets lost in the library, and Fortitude has to go and find him, and gets a tour of the library throughout, and eventually finds him in the children's room. So I wrote a sample, and a few months later they picked mine, and then I wrote some back matter about all the places that they went to, and then they sent it to the library for fact checking, and the library added a line that said, as of 2020, the Children's Library will be located at the newly renovated Mid-Manhattan Library across Fifth Avenue, which will be called the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. And I was like, you just ruined the book. You gave me this pitch where Patience finds Fortitude finds Patience in the children's room, and now as of 2020, it's going to get moved across the street. This book's not going to even make sense after 2 years. But 6 months later, I realized, wait, that could be the conflict for the sequel. So I pitched that to my editor, and my editor said, oh, let me talk it over with the library and see what they think. And so that was kind of that one I pitched to them, and I wasn't going to write it unless the library wanted another book. So, but yeah, so they all kind of come in different ways. Yeah. I even have, it's not announced yet, and I can't announce it, so you'll have to guess, but one of the other standalones will have a sequel or spin-off. And that again was me just writing it on my own and you know, seeing if the publisher wants it,
Right.
which is a very risky thing to do. I'll be honest. It could have been a big waste of my time. It's not Pyrosaurs. I wrote a bunch of sequels for Pyrosaurs, and one sequel and multiple spin-offs, and they just had no interest, and I couldn't really sell them to anybody else. So those were a bit of a, you know, me spinning my wheels because, yeah, I mean, I always think about when you're trying to get an agent, it's great to have a lot of manuscripts that you can submit to them if you're writing picture books and not illustrating, but they can't really be sequels of each other, because if your agent can't sell book one, you're not going to be able to sell book two. So it's good to have a wide breadth of different stories.
It is. I forgot to mention, if you have questions for Josh, let's put them in the Q&A box so that I can keep track of them. I see a couple questions in the chat box. We're going to get to those at the end. We will. So please just put your questions in the Q&A box for me. I would appreciate that. I think, well, first of all, I wanted to sort of alert people who don't know this or haven't read a lot of series, that there's really two kinds of series. There's one series like what you're writing, where each book is kind of a standalone story, but you have the same characters and maybe, or the same premise, or the same literary device, whatever that holds the series together. And then there are series like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, where it's a story that continues from book to book to book. So there is a huge story arc that spans the entire series. If you're writing picture books, you really don't want to write a series like that, because picture books need to stand alone. Each book needs to have a beginning, middle, end, be able to be read. And remember, you have a much younger audience. They might not remember where you left off a year later when the next book comes out, where the story left off. But I think part of what makes your stories, your books so successful, and that kind of series so successful, is you have a strong hook with each series. You can sum up the concept of the series in like a sentence, and we get it, you know. And then you have absolutely, in the case, well, really all your series, the characters are so interesting and multidimensional, and
a lot of that's because of the illustrators.
Yeah, but the concept of the characters has to be solid for the illustrator to have something to do with them too. So I think that's what, you know, you said they were living in your head and you just kept wanting to write about them. I think that's because the characters were so rich to start off with. And I think that's really, really important. If you look at all the picture book series out there, the characters lend themselves to multiple stories, you know, or in the case of your fairy tales, that concept can be used in multiple ways and get a different book each time. You're not just writing the same story over and over.
Yeah, I think of it a lot like a sitcom, like a TV show. Not and like sitcoms are, you know, situational comedies, but they're really based on the characters. They're not so much like procedurals. I feel like maybe chapter books are often procedurals, like the Cam Jansen mysteries and things like that. So I think of mine as sort of either, I guess, a lot like sitcoms, in that they're an episode. It's an episode in their lives, and in a lot of them you don't have to read them in any order. I think for the coding books, so coding, somebody I saw asked it, coding like software engineering. That's what I mean. That's my day job. I'm a software engineer, and I write picture books on the evenings and weekends, and coffee breaks and bathroom breaks, and anyway. But I tend to think of the stories as, you know, you don't want to have to read all four. Like the fourth book in a series isn't going to sell well if you have to read the first three beforehand. It's tricky, and so I think it's one of those things where they sort of do have to stand alone in a lot of ways, but you have to be able to kind of reintroduce the characters with little back matter, just kind of assume that everybody knows, and if they miss it. I think some of the great series like Scaredy Squirrel, it's very formulaic, but it works. And that's one of the ones that it entertains me. It cracks me up. I laugh at Scaredy Squirrel. And so there are a lot of great series out there, and some of them are very commercial, and you know, I don't know how, I mean, a lot of that depends on whether or not the publisher is you know, doing a lot of publicity for it. Like Ladybug Girl, and that has a spin-off with Bumblebee Boy. I mean, those are some good series that really, I feel like, started off as one. I don't know if Fancy Nancy had a series in mind as she was going.
Right.
They came out pretty quickly, so maybe Pinkalicious, you know, Pete the Cat, those ones. But yeah, I like to think of it as the first book in this series. I try to switch up the genres in these. So the first one is a race. The second one is a mystery. The third one is Mission to Frostville. It's sort of an action adventure. The fourth one is sort of like a magical body swap sci-fi absent-minded professor one. Not sci-fi and like as in aliens, because that'll be book 5 or 6 if we get there. But from that, I don't know. I'm very fortunate that Sterling's, you know, been cool with making all these different books, and they're all different, you know, not necessarily styles. They all fit together, but yeah. So and not repeating yourself too much.
Well, and that's, you know, you have such a range as a writer, because your Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast series and your It's Not a Fairy Tale series are very funny, and they're like weird funny, you know, and out of the box funny, which I love. And then you've got Patience and Fortitude, which is just like such a heartwarming, lovely story. And you've got your code books, which are, I love the concept behind them. And I would have never thought, let's teach kids about what coding is through building a sandcastle. You know, that's such a great idea. But it's not written in the same humorous vein as your other stuff. So you've got this range, and how do you do that?
Well, I honestly read a lot of picture books, and I read a wide breadth of picture books. I think for the How to Code a Sandcastle, I'll harken back to a series. I don't know if they have 10 books or 15 books. It's the Circumference and the First Round Table. It's about geometry. And you know, it's Circumference, get it? I think it's published by Charles Bridge in the 90s, and there's a ton of them. And geometry, like coding, could be a complicated topic to teach to a 3 to 10-year-old. But if you put it in a kid-friendly format, it might work. And I'll be honest with you, it took a really, really long time to figure out how to get coding into a picture book. My agent asked me a long time ago. She said, "Oh, you're a software engineer. Maybe you should write a book about coding. You know, that's a thing that's an important thing for kids to learn." And it was 3.5 completely different drafts of the books. I wrote one that, you know, like completely different characters, not revise it. Like I revised the first version and then realized it was way too complicated. Maybe it'll be a middle grade someday. The second version was even more, my critique partners didn't understand it. And if they're not going to understand it, then there's no way a 5-year-old's going to understand it. And so, and similarly, and finally, I boiled it down to that how-to, and it worked. But it took a really, really long time to figure it out. Yeah.
And now it ties in with STEM curriculum beautifully, and there you go.
Yeah.
It all worked out.
Well, it's the case of write what you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I mean, most writers have another job, so. You know.
So in the Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast series, you did something that you used inanimate objects as your characters, which a lot of, myself included, will tell authors, you know, you might not want to go there with your first book. It's hard to do, but you not only gave them very distinct personalities, which is the thing you need to do, but you created a world. I thought the world building in those books was fabulous.
I think that, you know, everyone says they want character-based stories. That's a big thing. It's one of the buzzwords that you hear. And when they say that, I feel like they mean the Little Elliots and the Louise Loves Arts and that type of story. I don't think that these are actually character-based stories. I think they're setting-based.
They are.
And which is not something I really thought about as I was writing it. But you don't actually know much about Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast through 3 books. You really don't. You know more about Baron von Waffle after the third book than you do about the main two characters, and it's because they're basically just the straight men in the story. They're a little bit of both, of like the straight and the conflict, but yeah, it's about the setting, and it's also in rhyme, which you're not supposed to do, or it's you hear. But I got a bunch of rejections saying that anthropomorphic food books don't sell, and but then you see books like Peanut Butter and Cupcake and Rude Cakes and Everybody Loves Bacon, and I mean there were a bunch that all came out around the same time. I think people don't. I mean, I'm vegan, so I think about this, but people don't like to think about their food as being alive. So I can understand that. I can understand why that would be potentially challenging for readers, whether you consciously think about it that way or not. But yeah, I think that that I didn't really think about whether it was a good idea or not. It was when I was starting to write back almost 10 years ago now, and I was just writing everything that entertained me. I wrote a bunch of it. The fact that one came out first, it was not the first book I wrote. I was writing that, Pyrosaurs, and Dear Dragon. Those three books I wrote all around the same time. I submitted all around the same time, and they came out all within a year and a half of each other. But publishing is weird. Different publishers work at different speeds. So it happened to be my first book, but it wasn't.
Right.
I mean, I would take anything I could get. So.
Well, of course. My friend Natasha Wing just put in the chat box her picture book, Bagel in Love.
Yeah.
Was also published by Sterling. So
Sterling likes their book.
They like food-based books.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just love the world in Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast, and how you turn the inside of a refrigerator into this entire country. They're scaling the mashed potato mountain, and they're getting lost in the chili lagoon, and I mean, it's just it was great.
Part of that is when you write in rhyme, and you're not supposed to force the rhyme, but it opened up other words I could use. It's like, a food rhymes with this, and a natural form of geology, geography, whatever, and like I can use either one.
So. Yeah. So now it's not a fairy tale series. So I said, you have to have a good hook to your series that you can sum up in one sentence. And I noticed on your website, you call it a meta fractured fairy tale series. And what do you mean by that? Can you explain that to people who haven't read it?
So yeah, it started out with sort of two things. One, the fact that characters in fairy tales and all books really, I mean, you need your characters to make bad decisions. That's like one of the most important things you can have your characters do in novels and every kind of writing. But they make really bad, dumb decisions. We're adults here, so I can say dumb. But yeah, I mean, if I tell kids, I'm like, if you walked into your grandmother's house and there was a wolf in her bed, would you be able to tell that it wasn't your grandmother? Like, yeah, I think you would. If you lived in the outskirts of the woods your whole life, wouldn't you know that dropping breadcrumbs on the ground would be kind of, they'll get eaten by animals. Like, you've lived there your whole life. Come on.
Yeah.
Right. So so that was kind of the thing that I thought I thought characters do dumb things in fairy tales, but I also, this was, I did grow up with him. BJ Novak and I were good friends growing up. And he came out with the book with no pictures. And I thought, it's really fun to make the adult reader look foolish. So is there a way that I can do that too? And so the idea behind this was to try to make the adult reader the storyteller. I try to call it the storyteller, not the narrator, because it's really the adult trying to tell the story. They fail because the characters don't want to do what they're supposed to do. So it's a fractured fairy tale in that the characters aren't doing the right things, but it's also meta in that, and it took a lot of design work to figure it out. But if you look, there's two different fonts. There's a on-script font once upon a time, blah, blah, blah. And then there's an off-script font for the narrator. Psst, Jack, wake up. And there's color-coded speech bubbles for the different characters. So, you know what the voice is. And there's a million little things that we had to do. Like the giant, for example, talks in all caps. And we had to do a lot of direction because the narration isn't actually narrating what's going on. The narrator is an unseen character in this book. The narrator is you, the adult reader. It was very complicated, but it was a lot of fun to write these. And so meta is sort of crossing the fourth wall, right? Meta is when either the characters are aware of the book, that they're in a book, or the storyteller interacts with the character. So it was meta fractured fairy tale is a pretty, probably the most succinct way to describe it. And that's what I'm going for. And I do try to change it up. It took a really long time when the illustrator finished the art for this book. The designer put the text down and it totally didn't work. Like you couldn't read it correctly. And I realized this as we had enough time, but we went back and forth for about 2 or 3 months on the design of each word and each paragraph, each line, because is it this font? Should we make that one bigger so that the reader has direction to say it louder, like little things like that. And so when we finished this one, the sequel, It's Not Hansel and Gretel, was a lot easier to write because I already knew what it was going to look like. Now, I don't know if this is a question that's going to come up later or that you're going to ask, but is writing sequels easier, harder? It's easier in a lot of ways. Once you know the pacing and how the story is going to go and where the illustrations might fit and how they're going to fit. And so we sort of perfected it in It's Not Hansel and Gretel, in my opinion. But I didn't want to just repeat the same story over and over again, where it's like, oh, the character doesn't want to do what the narrator wants, because that's going to get, it would work and it would be funny, but I wanted to mix it up. And so for the third one, for It's Not Little Red Riding Hood, we had the character not in an Amelia Bedelia, like do everything like word for word kind of way, but she agrees. She's like, okay, you want a little girl to go walking in the woods all by herself. You're the boss, and then she goes off and does it. And we do other silly things that fracture things in this one, and as well. The wolf calls in sick, and Captain Hook fills in for the wolf, and anyway. But so yeah, I think we wanted to try to change it up and not have it be the same repetitive thing where the characters are just going to argue with the narrator every time. And we have some ideas for another one. Again, there's no deal for a next one yet, but a lot of it has to do with how well the books do and whether they sell. And if people buy them and they want more, then cool. If it's not worth it for the publisher to pay me and an illustrator and all their time to, not make very much money, then I can't blame them. I understand.
Well, I think part of the success of your It's Not a Fairy Tale series, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably hits kids who are on the middle to the older end of the picture book audience who know the original stories. They already know how the story's supposed to go. And so part of the humor is this character is not following the rules, is not doing it right, but you have to kind of know the original to see the difference.
Definitely.
And so a 3-year-old might not get it.
No.
Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
No, I don't think they, and it's, no, they wouldn't. And that's why, so it had to be a fairy tale that most people know. And there's a reason why I actually stayed away from Little Red Riding Hood first, because that one is kind of the most overdone, I feel like. I don't want to say overdone, the most done. And so I started, it had to be, I didn't want to do Goldilocks, Little Red Riding Hood, or what's the third one? Or the Three Little Bears. And the Three Bears? Three Little Pigs. What am I thinking? Goldilocks, Three Little Pigs. Three Little Pigs. It's been a long time since I had my coffee today. The Three Little Pigs, Goldilocks, or Little Red Riding Hood. I eliminated those first because I felt like they were done a lot. And so I thought, well, but it still has to be one that everybody knows. At least every 5 or 6-year-old knows. 4-year-olds might not know Jack and the Beanstalk. I mean, the giant dies at the end. The witch dies in Hansel and Gretel. They may not know that. So, but I thought that those were the safer ones on that line where everybody knows it, but it's not overdone. And like, I can't do Hans my Hedgehog. You wouldn't know if I was telling the real story or not,
Right.
you know, or some other obscure grim fairy tale. So yeah, but then when it came time to talk about what we should do for a third one, my editor said, so there's a reason why Little Red Riding Hood is done a lot, because it sells. So why don't we try that one? So yeah, so that's why we went with that as the third one.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Well, let me open up the Q&A here and see what some people want to ask you. Let's see. If you can't finish a book, a first book in a series, or if you can't publish a first book in a series, then what about self-publishing? Do you have any thoughts on self-publishing?
I'm not an expert in that. I do know that it's probably hard to sell a sequel to a self-published book traditionally. If you are interested in self-publishing it, that's awesome. You know, go for it. If that's the route that you want to take, it will require, you know, the marketing and all of the design and probably some expense to get it, you know, professionally edited to do right. But that works. I think that if you wanted to sell if you think that the first book that you self-publish will sell so well that someone will then want to buy your sequel or maybe republish your first book, the odds are probably against you for that happening, but it will give you the experience of writing a book. I think you're more likely to be able to sell a brand new series after self-publishing a book if you want to go traditionally. But if you want to self-publish, then that's awesome. I have loads of friends that self-publish,
Right.
and they enjoy it. Not as many that self-publish picture books, because that adds a layer of challenge, but I have friends that have done it and they've made good books. And but you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing to get that done. I actually do a lot of stuff with a group called the Writers Loft, which is it's a local community in Sherborne, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And we've self-published we're in the process of self-publishing our second picture book anthology of poetry. But we're a bunch of people that we know how to make books. When I say we, I contributed a poem. I did not do the design or anything other than that. But it's a place where we've done the research, we've done the work, and there's a bunch of people working on it that have eyes on it. So, you know, as long as you're confident that you're self-publishing the book and you're happy with the result, then go for it. It's more about getting the word out, and the marketing that is something that probably I shy away from self-publishing for that reason. I have to do a lot of marketing as it is with just traditional publishing. So I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I know that there are books that have been self-published. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but here, it's this book here, Felix Is by Lisa Bunker. I think she self-published this first, and then it was picked up by Viking. So it does happen. It absolutely does happen. This is a middle grade book, and it's awesome, by the way. So check it out. But it's so it does happen that you can self-publish a book and it'll get picked up, but probably not the sequel.
Well, and there are, you know, if you're self-publishing a picture book, first of all, you need to pay for good illustrations. That's going to make all the difference. But then if you want to try to get a publisher to pick up the series, they might not want the same illustrator that you chose. And so there's a lot of layers of complication, like you said. I think if you're going to self-publish the first book in a series, be prepared to self-publish all the books in the series. You know, commit to that if you really want it as a series. But it could be a great launching point to then submit your next series to a traditional publisher. Yeah.
I mean, and for everything that we say, you know, there will be an example of the opposite.
Of course.
Like,
and people will let us know next week. Here's an example that went right against what you said, which is fine. We like to hear it. Any suggestions for putting together a picture book submission package? So now you have an agent. So is it different with an agent than before you had an agent as to what the submission package looked like?
Yeah. So if you're writing nonfiction, you definitely want to have like a package and your background and things like that. I don't really do much for my silly fiction picture books other than we send a pitch. It's a lot like a query, but we don't have to do like the intro and the exit. It's just the summary, because my agent, my agent already has a relationship with the people that she's sending them to, and that's what a good agent will have. Not all agents are good agents, but I have a great agent, and so she will we will put that pitch paragraph together, and she'll have my bio at the end of it. And you know, the editor may know who I am, they may not. And so, but my agent knows what that editor likes and thinks that my book will be a fit. When I didn't have an agent, I mean, I was flying blind, and most things were black holes. We still get a ton of black holes, not a ton. We still get a number of black holes. A black hole is when you send an email out, whether it's a query or you send something to an editor and they just never respond. So you're basically sending into a black hole. But I think even with my agent, if you take away, so I have a lot of sequels in the series, right? But if you take all of the sequels and series away, and only can include the first book in them, and you take the fact that I had actually, Sterling got Lady Pancake out of a slush pile and Pyrosaurs went to Scholastic out of a slush pile, my agent has only sold, we've sold 6 out of 154 submissions to places. We've sold 6 books. Now we've sold a bunch of sequels, so I'm not including those. And we also have a couple books like where Lost in the Library, where I wrote a sample, but it was because my agent is good at networking. She found out that they were making a series and asked me if I was interested. And so that's not one of the 150 because I didn't write this story, and you know, but yeah, so I think we've, as far as like unique individual stories, I'm 6 for 154. So which means I'm getting just under 150. I mean, that's a 3%. That's not, but that's with an agent. That's with an agent.
So before people just start signing off at this point and going, it's not worth it, tell us why it's worth it to keep going.
Because it only takes one. It only takes one yes. And it's a book. Yeah. I just want to say 6 for 154, that's good. That's good. That's 6 books that we sold with potential for sequels. And in many cases they had sequels. Yeah. But even if they didn't, that's 6 books. I mean, the fact that I've sold 1 book seems incredible to me. So yeah, it only takes one. It only takes one yes.
Right. And when you say 154, you mean 154 submissions. You don't mean 154 different manuscripts.
Right. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. It's probably been about 12 or 13 submissions. So I'm probably sold probably half the things that we've gone out with. Right. And half. And you know what? You know what it means? They weren't good enough. That's what it means. Or good enough yet. Or it wasn't the right.
Selling half of the manuscripts you write is actually a really good percentage, I think.
Well, it's half of the manuscripts that my agent agrees to go out with.
Okay, yes.
The ones I send to my agent, we probably only agree to go out with about half of those. And the ones that even get to my agent, you know, I write a lot that don't make it through the first or second critique because they're not good enough. So yes, half that we agree are good enough with my agent get sold, but that's probably only like 10% of what I write. So,
okay. So write a lot is a key.
Yeah, my best advice is write a lot and write a lot of different things.
Yeah, yeah.
Keep writing new things because you're going to learn so much along the way. You're going to learn so much. You go to Picture Book Summit, you're going to learn a ton. So anything you start after that, you're gonna know so much more, and your next first draft is going to be a better first draft than any first draft you ever had.
Absolutely.
So yeah, keep writing new things.
I have interviewed a lot of authors over the years, and they all said, I'm so glad my first 3 manuscripts didn't sell, but they taught me how to write the 4th manuscript. Yeah. And thank goodness no one ever saw those other 3, because now I'd have to live them down, you know. So it's true. Yeah.
You have to go through the process of writing, revising, getting that first manuscript critique, to realizing that it's not good enough yet and starting a new one. But your new one will have all of that information that you've learned from going through the process of the first one. And I submitted stuff way too early. Everybody does probably, thinking that it's good enough. But you know, that's part of everybody's journey.
You need patience and fortitude to be a children's book writer.
Definitely patience.
Absolutely. Patience for sure. So I don't expect you to answer this question with specific numbers in any way, shape, or form. But someone asked, how much does someone make on average with a traditionally published book? And you really can't answer that question in any way because it depends on the publisher, it depends on the book, it depends if it's your first book or your 10th book.
The numbers have been out there though lately, especially in the last couple weeks because of pay disparity, especially in
Right.
white men. So there are some numbers. So I think that ballpark, the most you're going to get if you write a picture book is about $25,000. I've never gotten that much,
No.
but that's like kind of the high end. No one's offering more than that unless it's like some auction situation.
Right.
And so yeah, I think my very, very first book was only a couple $1,000s that I was offered, and it was from a medium-sized publisher.
Right.
But so that's the range, and small publishers might offer nothing, and you only get money on the back end. So
Get
somewhere
royalties.
in that range, and you know, if it's always an advance against royalties. If you don't know what that is, I'm sure there's probably information on your site about that.
There is on our blog. We have information. Yes.
So
Yes.
go search for advance against royalties. But so is it the numbers? Is it how well it does? I think that's part of it. It has to be able to make money, but I don't even know what those numbers are because I don't know what they're paying the illustrator.
Right.
I don't know how much they're putting into the marketing and publicity, and I don't know what it's. A lot of times it's about what their expectations are. If they have high expectations and it underperforms, then like if they put $50,000 worth of marketing and publicity and it sells 100,000 copies. That sounds like a lot of copies, but maybe that's not good. I mean, it's all about relative to expectations.
Right.
And I think that part of it is both of the series that I have more books of are with medium-sized publishers. So, and I think the fact that this is with Sterling, these are with Two Lines. Those aren't the big five, or Scholastic or Houghton Mifflin. They're medium-sized publishers, and so their expectations are likely to never be too high, or less likely to be too high. So because they're never going to spend $1 million on publicity for a particular book. Maybe not never. I take that back. I don't know. Sterling just published a picture book written by Vanessa Williams. So I mean, I'm sure that they paid a lot for that. But so that's just one of those things. But I think it's a lot about the expectations. And even then, like, so much of publishing is still a black hole to me, a black box. I don't know what goes on in those meetings. I don't know what the numbers are that they think I don't even know how many copies they print. That's a lot of it too. I think one of the things you can kind of gauge is if you start to go to signings and you see a second printing of your book early enough, you know that so the printings are always down on the copyright page. And this is a first printing because you can see all the numbers 1 through 10. And there's a whole history of why they're backwards or every other, you can look that up. But if the number 1 is removed, it's a second printing. If the lowest number is a 7, it's the 7th printing. So if your book keeps getting printed, it means every time they print it, they expect to sell that many. Usually they expect to sell that many within a year is what I've heard. Of a first printing. So if you start to see second printings after a few months, you know the book's doing well.
Right. And that's a good motivation for authors to help with the publicity. Because first, if your book sells out the first printing faster than the publisher expected, you're more likely to get a higher advance on the second book. And also, it doesn't matter how much advance you get. Ultimately, you are being paid in royalties. So if your book sells really well, you're going to make the money. You just won't get as much upfront with the advance. So, and then of course, that makes the publisher want to ask for another book from you. So yes, it's all about the numbers. And way back when I worked at a publishing house, I sat in on some of those meetings where they decided whether or not to, issue a contract, and there are a lot of factors that go into it. It's not just that the editor loved your book. There's a lot of different departments that weigh in, a lot of numbers are crunched. It's a big formula. And sometimes the best books just don't get picked up because the sales force says, you know what? I can't sell another pig book. Bookstore buyers are saying we're sick of pigs. So it doesn't matter how great your book is. If it's got a pig in it, they're not going to buy it. You know what I mean?
Or we already have, there's so many reasons. We already have a unicorn book on our list. I mean, like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, long story short, for that question, Josh still has a day job.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot
I'm not planning on quitting for a while. So
yeah. So this is I mean, yes, you can make a living as a children's book writer, but it doesn't happen overnight. You need to have a lot of books out there. And
Jane Yolen told me 30.
yeah,
So I trust her. Because of the day job, I don't travel around doing a lot of school visits. So
right.
I could make more money in the writing world from that perspective, but I would have to quit the day job. So
Yes,
that's a risk.
That's true. You can do a lot with school visits. Okay, I'm just gonna take a couple more questions here. I know it's late for you there, Josh. Thank you for
Oh,
staying.
I'm happy hanging out however long you want.
All right. I didn't know if you had to get up for work tomorrow or anything.
No, we get a 4-day weekend.
Oh, that's right. It's 4th of July. See,
Yeah.
I've lost all track. You're right. It is a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people are asking about sort of formatting the manuscript, how you indicate page numbers on the manuscript, which you don't. By the way, you double space your manuscript.
Well, I actually do paginate sometimes.
Okay, I was
Not
going
always.
to ask you, depending on, like with your fairy tale books, that format is so unique. I imagine you had to do some.
So for that one, I definitely write it like a script, like a play. And it's always, I actually color code it based on who's talking, because it's just to make it easier to read. But I think, I think with my rhyming manuscripts, I tend not to paginate because the pacing sort of figures itself out. You want to have like 2 or 4 or 6 stanzas a page. But some of my other ones, I think about a little bit. I don't think it really matters. I think that an editor will ignore it if they want to ignore it, and they'll use it if they want to use it.
Yeah.
But for picture books, I most of my picture books are 40 pages, so I usually start on page 6-7 and go to 36-37 because that's how they are. It's 16 spreads, but I've seen them come back to me with editing enough times now. I definitely do not start out that way, and you don't have to do it that way. It's not expected of you, but at some point it will come back to me with somebody will have paginated it. And so I realized, like, oh, okay, I can write mine. I mean, I'm not a dummy person. I can't even draw stick figures. So I've never done the dummies, but paginating for me has the same effect of making a dummy. I can kind of pace it out and make sure that I don't have too much on one page, too much happening without changing the picture. So.
Right. No, that's a good tip. I didn't think about that because I was going to ask you if you make dummies. I always recommend people do that just so they can read it as they turn the pages and see the pacing. But if you paginate it on the page, figure out where the page breaks are going to go, that'll help you visualize the same thing.
Yeah, and you'll see, like, wait, I only had 1 sentence on this page, but I had 7 the one before and 12 the one after. Like, something's off with my pacing. Paginating is going to help. And even if you took out the pages, something would still be off with the pacing of your story,
right?
But the pagination is what helps. You paginate basically when there's a new picture to be shown.
Yeah. Or which means the scene has probably changed.
I mean, and there's some that are like, there's a montage with spot illustrations. Like, you'll figure that stuff out. But I think, but again, this is stuff I did not do when I started. You learn a lot from the process of making books. With my very first book, with Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast, they sent me the sketches and I said, wow, that's cool. That's awesome. And they were probably like, do you have any feedback? I was like, oh, no, I'm not even sure they asked me, but I wouldn't have been able to help them anyway. I didn't know what I was doing. But now that I've been through it 4, 5, 6 times, I know, oh, you know what? If I had to redo it on the very last page of Lady Pancake, it's there stood the bottle of syrup at last, but wait, it was empty. They stood quite aghast. And then you turn the page and it says, licking his lips with the sneer that was awful, out of the shadows crept Baron von Waffle. If I had this to do over, I would have put everything before Baron von Waffle on the previous page, because as soon as I turn the page, you see him. But I'm still saying, licking his lips with a sneer that was awful, out of the shadows crept. So I actually say that on this page. Out of the shadows crept Baron von Waffle. So that's how I read it, but nobody else does. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know it till I've read this book 3,000 times. So I think that the things you can, these are things that some of it you just have to get with experience in there, and it'll come. It will come. The more you do it, the better you'll get.
Mhm. And once an editor starts working with you, once the illustrations are done, sometimes the places where you thought the pages would break get changed because of the way the illustrations flow and that kind of thing.
And that's another thing too, is that you got to trust the people that are making these books. It's
Yeah.
their job. I mean, they know what they're doing, right? I read a lot of books, but that doesn't mean I know how to make a book. I watch a lot of movies and play a lot of video games. It doesn't mean I know how to make a movie and play a video game. But this is their job. They make books. So if they think the page turn should be somewhere else, there's probably a good reason for it. So, you know, letting go a little of the ownership of some of that, letting them do their job because, you know, they've studied it, they've trained, they're experts.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. Good advice. So Marlena asks, when you're writing, I'm sure you see your characters acting their parts. How do you relax your mind and just write the text and not worry about what the illustrator will see? So is there a way you can turn off that picture in your head or worrying about what the illustrations might be and just write?
I think that I fortunately don't think that visually, specifically visually. So, you know, Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast, I mean, I'll keep going back to the example. I didn't say that they have a whipped cream for hair and a wafer crown and a cherry and a chocolate mustache and a strawberry hat. That was all Brendan. All he had was their names. So I didn't really think that visually. I don't, maybe I'm lucky in that it's kind of cloudy for me. So I don't necessarily know how to tell you how to make it cloudy, but I do think that if you can just try to stay general in your head as possible, like the main character doesn't have to have red hair, even if you're imagining it that way. I imagined these dragons as being red. I don't know why. That's just what I thought. When it came as green, I was like, oh, cool, they're green. But I wasn't disappointed. You know, for a second, I was like, that's not what I thought. But you know what? It doesn't matter. And Rodolfo Montalvo, who illustrated the book, and the art director, they know what they're doing. He knows how to draw a lot better than I do. If I wanted to draw it myself, I should have learned to draw. That's what it comes down to.
Can you show a few pictures from inside that book, the Dear Dragon book?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love this story.
This book is it might be my best quote unquote book. It's, you know, I wrote it as two boys, a boy and a dragon, are pen pals, and they don't realize they're writing to a different species. And so, you know, George is building a fort, and this is what Blaze imagines a fort looks like. And Blaze goes skydiving, and this is what George imagines is skydiving, but here's what's really happening. And I just thought it would be funny throughout. So, you know, this is Blaze's pet Bengal kitten, and he needs a bath, but this is what George thinks the bath is. And, you know, oh, he built a volcano, but that's what he thinks the volcano is, and so forth. And, but what was cool is, you know, sometimes people will see things in your books that you never intended or never even thought of. The editor who acquired this book said, what I really loved about it was, on my first phone call with her after she acquired the book, she said, I love that two characters became friends, even though they have completely different backgrounds. And I was like, oh yeah, they do, don't they? Like, I didn't even realize it. And I wrote the book. And then when educators started using it, they started saying, I love how we can talk about making assumptions. You know, George made an assumption that he was writing to a boy, and Blaze made an assumption he was writing to a dragon. But we can talk about, you know, making assumptions and based on what people look like and think. And I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even realize it. So sometimes people will see things in your books that you didn't even know was there. And now if I tried to write a book and forced that theme of, I want to write a book that shows that two characters can become friends with different backgrounds, and making assumptions, it might have still worked. It might have still worked, but it might have been really forced and not worked. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, and in that book, you know, you never set up the premise really. You never say they're pen pals and they don't understand that they're writing to a different species. That is completely shown through the illustrations, and the misinterpretation of the letters is shown completely through the illustrations. So did you put notes on your manuscript for that?
In that one, I did not actually do that. I had to have, and you know what? It took a lot of trust that the editor would get it.
Yeah.
And you know what, though, the right editor was sent it.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so when the right editor got it, then she, and other editors that passed on it or that, didn't connect with it, it might have been that they just didn't really, and that's okay. Although I will say, I put illustration notes on things now, and I've talked to other writers, and I always say, try to write what, not how. If you write, if it's really important that you see that under the bed is the missing toy that this character is going to be looking for the whole book, but you see it on page 2, whether it's so the reader can be in on something that the character's not, or on the reread, say toy under bed, but don't say there's a toy under the bed behind the chess set next to the pink stuffed animal. Like, no, don't say how to do it. That's the illustrator's job. Just say what. You don't have to tell them that the character has red hair, because that's the illustrator's job. I will say I've loosened up a little bit about visual gags. You don't want to overdo it and have the whole thing be visual gags. But if you have a visual joke that will help sell the book, help an editor or an agent understand it better, it might be worth using. But I have heard very recently from friends who are querying that that agents have said, no illustration notes, I don't want to see any, I don't like them. So maybe that's the wrong agent for you if that's the case.
Right. And I've talked to editors who say, you can put them in, but I'm going to take them out of the manuscript before I give it to the illustrator.
And that's fine too. I'm totally fine with that too. Take them out. But I want to make it as easy as possible for the editor to acquire it.
Right.
And if it helps the editor acquire it, even if they take it out, it's going to help me sell the book. So anyway, having an agent to bounce that off of, and the fact that she's at an agency that has 13 agents, that they can all bounce ideas off of each other helps. It helps. So not that she asks every question to all the agents that I have, but or any of them, but she at least could and does at times. So.
Right. Okay, last question, because we're coming up on an hour and a half here, which is longer than we usually go, but
I talk a lot, I'm sorry.
You're such a great guest, and everybody's sticking around. My participants have not dropped off, so that's awesome. How do you know when you're done revising a manuscript?
It's hard. Sometimes it's after 12 or 15 times and it's still not right. Sometimes it's after just a couple. And you feel like it's pretty good. I think that the general sense is when my critique partners are in alignment and don't have much else to add. It's important that you always have critique partners who are better writers than you. Because if you're the best writer in your group, then you're not going to learn anything. And sometimes I just think it's always important to have people that are better than you if you can, because it's important to always keep learning. I would say, but when I'm done, it's tough. I think when I like it a lot, because I have to like it a lot, and my critique partners have kind of stopped giving me feedback. And I have a lot of different critique partners. I don't have one group that I go to or that we exchange all the time, and I know sort of some strengths of the different critique partners. Some of them, again, this took years for me to figure out, but like there's a couple that are great for sending a first draft to. But if I send them a later draft, they'll give me all these ideas of how to take the book to the next level. And I'm like, I already figured out what I wanted this book to be. So I didn't really so it's, you have to be smart about which, knowing what your different critique partners will tell you. But the one, when you start sending it to new people for the first time who are not already invested, that's why I like to send it to just 1 or 2 people at a time. Once you see someone else's manuscript, you're invested. And seeing it again for the second time, you know a little bit about it, you know what's happening, you know what changes might have already been made and improvements there are, but also you're rooting for this manuscript. You want to see it become a book. And so you're not impartial anymore. So I usually try to wait as long as possible to send things to my agent till everything's in the best shape as possible so she can see it and really go at it and tear it apart as much as she can. So yeah, I think it's when I'm not getting that much feedback from my critique partners that are seeing it for the first time. I will say that happens sometimes when they don't really love it too. So you have to kind of be aware of which version of not that much feedback you're getting. Is it that there's really not that much more you can do with it, because there's always something more you can do. I mean, I even showed you in this one something I would change from 5 years ago. So, but yeah, that's how I know. That's how I know. And then I sent it to my agent, and she might not even think it's the right one to go out with, or maybe she says, that's cool, let's go out with these other ones first, and then by the time it's ready for that third one, I've written 4 more news stories, and we pick one of those instead. And so that's why not everything goes out, but yeah, so it is hard to know. There's no right answer.
There really isn't. And I think at some point you just have to take that leap of faith, because like you said, you can always change one more thing.
Yeah. And I mean, people say give it space sometimes and then look at it later. I think, you gotta keep working on new things too. If you're not sure it's done, go work on something else, start a new story, and then go back to it. Even if it's a day or two later, just like kind of cleanse your palate with something else. And then see if you still love it as much as you did, or you think, I kind of would rather tweak. And sitting on critique partner's advice. If you try to make the change that afternoon and send it to another person, you might not have, even when you disagree with something right off the bat, you might sleep on it and realize the next day, like, I might have been onto something.
Yeah.
Maybe I should make that change. I mean, that happens to me all the time, or I'll probably wake up in the middle of the night thinking that. But
yeah.
If people have other questions they didn't get to get answers to, you can always tag me on Twitter and I'll try to answer them later. So.
That's very generous of you, Josh. Thank you so much for that. Well, this is awesome. Before we sign off, I have to give a shout out to Allison here, at the beginning, she said she was driving home. She pulled over into a parking lot so she could watch this on her way home. She knew she wasn't going to get home in time, and she's been loving it.
Hi, Allison.
She just put in the chat box, she finally said, I got to get home. And she started out, and now she has a flat tire. So luckily she was still in the parking lot when it happened. So,
oh no.
Sorry, Allison.
Where is she? Maybe somebody else online can help her.
Yeah, really. Where are you, Allison? Do you have AAA? Do you have? So anyway, Allison, thank you. I'm so sorry to hear that, but thank you for pulling over to be with us tonight. And hope you get home safely. So Josh, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you.
Really great. We're so thrilled to have you. And I hope you come back at some point and we can talk about something else. When you get another new slew of books coming out, we'll talk about them.
Oh, anytime. Thank you. And I'm definitely going to log in future weeks. This was a lot of fun. Thank you. Who's going to be on next week? Do you know?
Eileen Robinson with.
Ooh, I love Eileen. Yeah, she's great. Oh, she's fantastic.
Great. Talking about writing middle grade books for boys. So that'll be fun.
I took a workshop with her back before all my books were published. She's fantastic. Tell her I say hi, or I will next week.
Okay. Yeah. Show up next week. Okay. Well, thanks again, everybody. And Josh, thank you again. This has been great. So good night, everybody.